To sit down, there's plenty of seats still available in the upstairs balcony. And just some housekeeping, there's water, refreshments to the front left, and unfortunately the bathroom is outside of the building, and you walk around to the left. So if anyone is looking or needing the restroom, just go out the front door, down the steps, follow around the side of the building, and you'll see it says public restrooms. All right, so first of all, I would like to thank you all for taking the time tonight to listen, learn, and play your own role in changing the direction. I'd like to acknowledge some key individuals that came together in an extremely short time to put together these efforts. And I'm going to ask each of you to stand when I acknowledge you. So first we have Lisa Dean, a Stratham resident. Can you please stand up? So Lisa's been working extremely hard as a parent and a community advocate to help work with the folks in the field, but to really bring this together as a community event, so thank you very much. State Representative Patrick Abrami. Former Chief Justice John Broderick, who we will all be hearing from. Tara Ball from Connors Climb. Shamra Simpson from AFSP, which is the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. She's in the back. Debbie Bard, who could not be here, from NAMI, New Hampshire. She's not feeling well, but we have someone else here representing. Deborah Vassapoli from Exeter Hospital. Susan Stover from Connors Climb. I think she's in the back over there. And so many of you had helped along the way, so thank you. It truly does take a village, and that's a lot of the messaging we're going to hear tonight. So thank you for taking the time to be here. There are packets of information that are on your seats, and something I wanted you to notice on there is a comment card, because this is just a conversation starter, and we all know more work needs to be done. So we're hoping before you leave tonight, you could take a few minutes to fill out the comment card, give us your feedback, and also give us ideas of what else you want to see in the community to increase your awareness and your role to play a trusted adult in young people's lives. And finally, I'd like to introduce Governor Christopher Sununu. Thank you so much for being here. Governor Sununu is the 82nd governor of the New York State, New Hampshire, and is currently serving his second term. The governor is a local resident residing in Newfields with his wife Valerie and their 3 children. Rebuilding New Hampshire's mental health system has been a significant focus of his administration. We are grateful for his understanding of the importance of this message we will hear tonight and taking the time to join us. Thank you so much.
Great. Well, thank you very much. I just want to take a couple moments and first, obviously, thank Justice Broderick. I've had the honor of traveling the state a little bit with Justice Broderick and hearing him talk very directly, not as a judge per se, but just as a dad and as someone whose family has struggled with issues of mental illness. Obviously, Commissioner Adelblut, who's here as well in the Department of Education, who's really taken a lot of these initiatives to the forefront. Look, very briefly, and I could go on all day, but you know, what we inherited about 2 years ago was a system in complete crisis. And there's no way to sugarcoat that. There's no better way to say it, frankly. But it was a mess when you talk about mental health, the infrastructure that we had. We had programs here and programs there, but everything was very nascent. It was very siloed. And when we talked about the issues of mental health, or we talked about issues of abused kids at DCYF, we talked about issues, what was happening in the classrooms, we talked about issues of the opioid crisis and how it related to folks that were dealing with mental health issues. It all came back to the concept that we had a system that was being reactive, not proactive. We had a system that was supposedly prepared for a crisis, but had no means of going in and being preventative, had no means of going in and being proactive, of working with a family or a child that had a problem to ensure that that child or that family didn't become a child or family in crisis. And that's where our system has fallen apart. It has fallen apart. The most important thing is to take all the aspects of this issue, and there's a lot of different puzzle pieces here. You could go on all night about the different levels that you can get to when you talk about these puzzle pieces, but they have to work together. I see that as the foremost responsibility of the government. At least make sure the system, the left hand knows what the right hand is doing. So when we came on board, the first person I met with was Ken Norton, who runs NAMI, who really is one of the leading advocates in Concord when you talk about mental illness. And we brought everybody together, about 25 real stakeholders together. And we said, let's put everything on the table, absolutely everything. And some are regulatory barriers, some are funding issues, some are innovative ideas that we talk about but haven't really done anything with. And we moved forward on a lot of this, and a lot of it was what we call designated receiving facility beds out in communities, a lot of it at the time, and still very much deals with the emergency room crisis we have. Right? People that have a mental illness issue and in a moment of crisis, they go into the emergency room and frankly they're there, not for a day, but sometimes at the time it was weeks. We had 4 or 5 weeks, people waiting in emergency rooms. That tells me the system was absolutely broken. Is the system working perfectly today? Absolutely not. We got a long way to go. This room would not be filled if we didn't have a long way to go. And I'm very enthused by the fact that we have a full room, because this is not a problem to be just solved by the government or just by schools or just by parents or just by a system, but believe you me, every single person has to understand the level of crisis we have in this state with this issue. And every single person has to take, at some level, the obligation and responsibility of being part of that solution. Because whether you know you're dealing with it in your workplace or your family or you don't, you are. It is there in some form, right? We know that. The data proves that. So everybody is being impacted at some level. The key, again, is making sure that we're providing the services, the structure, the pathway forward, the efficiency of the system, to make sure that, again, we're not allowing these issues of problems to become crises. We're instituting something that I'm very excited about, the social emotional learning programs, the Choose Love program into our schools. First state in the country to actively go into schools and say, we are going to provide a program free of cost to be an active solution to help kids work out problems, to be really part of each other's solution. I talked in my inaugural address last week about the Jason Flatt Act, which we will move forward in New Hampshire, that will simply say, very simply, teachers are going to get 2 hours per year at least of suicide prevention training, which along with it comes better understanding of what mental illness is, the warning signs and whatnot, right? These are important first steps that we can make in bringing schools as part of the solution. Commissioner Edelblut and his team have been phenomenal about moving forward on a lot of these aspects. And most importantly, and I'll wrap up very quickly here, it's not just going out to events like this and talking as a dad, as a governor, as a commissioner, talking at folks, here's what we're doing, goodbye and good luck. That's the old way of doing things. Those days are done. This is about really empowering the stakeholders, you as family members, as people in the community, as folks running a business, right? What can you do? What can you do to be part of our solutions? Bring us the solutions. We don't have all the home run solutions at the State House. If we did, the problem would have been solved long ago. But what we have to do is be that tool for you. I know Senator Sherman, where's Tom Sherman? Tom? Senator Sherman is here, right? Representative Abrami is here. These are your representatives, your individuals. You have the most representative body of government in America. We do, 400 members, representing 1 million people in New Hampshire. That means by definition, it's the most representative body of government in the country. That's for you. That's an amazing tool. So you can pick up the phone and talk to these individuals or call my office or talk to the commissioner and say, we have an idea. We want to explore something. And then that idea comes to that table and you let individuals drive better results. You let families, right? You let folks that are on the front lines drive the solutions that we can then blanket across the state. Every idea is open for discussion. Every idea needs to be put on the table. The fact that we're here, it's not just to listen to Justice Broderick, but I tell you, it's an amazing story. And it's empowering to have individuals, especially individuals that have gone through some really tough stuff. God bless anyone that is willing, after that level of crisis, to be able to come out day after day sometimes and put it on the line and talk about it. It empowers all of us to tell our stories. And it's those stories that are simply going to drive better results for the state. Let us know what we can do. Let us know what your ideas are. Let us know what's happening in this community. What happens in Exeter might be very different than what happens in Colebrook or Manchester or Pittsburgh, New Hampshire. But again, by putting all of this on the table, understanding the impacts of your individual communities, what's happening on the front lines, that's how we can simply make the system better. We're really counting on everyone being part of this. So thank you again for coming out. Thank you again for the sponsors here, Dartmouth Hitchcock and Exeter Hospital, and everyone really coming together to make this a very important, I think, moment for Exeter, but also for carrying this across the state, because this is going on all across the state. It's very empowering and very important, and again, we just as an individual, cannot thank you guys enough for really being part of it. Thank you. Okay, can I introduce him? All right, I'll introduce him, because I get excited when I get to introduce this guy. I've gotten to know Justice Broderick for a few years now. And over the past couple of years, as we took mental health as a real initiative a couple years ago, and we're trying to just take it to the next level again and again, having him on the front lines, not just with me, I feel like I'm whatever we can do to support him. He has led these efforts to have these discussions, to empower us to have what are really important, sometimes tough, but really important conversations, and ask tough questions, not just of him, but of ourselves. Right? What else can we be doing? This is an area where if a lot of folks are struggling with it, sometimes they don't even know the first question to ask. They don't even know where to look first for help and resources and whatever it might be. But he's been traveling the state, spending a lot of his time, I'd say the majority of his time, with kids, talking directly to kids. And I got to tell you, as the politician, walking into a room of high schoolers and grabbing their attention is not an easy thing to do, right? It's amazing. This guy silences rooms of 1,000 students at a time. It's really, really amazing stuff. And then, again, the fact that he's willing to stick around and he invites the kids up and they ask questions, and the things that kids are, I don't want to embarrass you, but I got to tell you, students will come right up and say, no one's ever said that. No one's ever told a story like that to me before. Kids that feel alone. That's the first sign of these crises. These kids are feeling alone. They feel like they don't have a string sometimes, something to hold on to, right? They do. We just haven't provided the resources and the tools necessary sometimes for them to be willing to reach out. It's our job to help them feel that empowerment. And what this gentleman has been able to go around to the state and do, empowering a lot of these kids to ask questions, to engage with the teachers, engage with the students at a very direct one-on-one level, I got to tell you, it's absolutely awesome. I wish I could replicate 20 of them. So with no further ado, Justice Broderick. Love you, buddy.
Thank you. I think I'll stand here. Can you hear me? Yes? First of all, I want to thank Connors Klein for tonight. I want to thank Lisa Dean for what she's done. I want to thank Governor Sununu, who gets it. He gets it. I also want to acknowledge Natalie's mom, Marcia, who's here, and Natalie's stepfather. I can't imagine the pain, but I'm so proud of your courage for being here. And I think I can speak for this room when I say you should feel hugged by everyone here. Thank you for coming. I also want to thank all of you for coming out on a pretty cold night. It's a tribute to this district and to this community. I'm here tonight because I need your help. That's why I'm here. I've spent the last 31 months of my life, at least much of it, trying to start a different conversation around mental illness, a conversation which we all know has not existed in generations in our country. It's time. It's way past time. I've had some amazing professional opportunities in my lifetime, but this is the most important thing I have done in my entire professional life, and I mean that. I need your help. I grew up in a town in Massachusetts. I'm sorry, someone has to grow up in Massachusetts. It was me. But my town had 20,000 people, and everyone in my town had perfect mental health. Isn't that amazing? And every marriage in my town was really happy. That's the bubble I'm from. I don't live there now, but that's the bubble I came from. I grew up in a middle-class community north of Boston. My father was a high school science teacher. My mother worked in an office in the neighboring town. My best friend, when I was 10 years old, lived right across the street from my house. His father was a graduate, as is the governor, from MIT. In my childhood, in my neighborhood, MIT was rock star status. My friend's uncle, his father's brother, didn't finish high school. He was an inpatient at the Danvers Mental Hospital in Danvers, Massachusetts. Every adult who spoke at that place, and every kid, including me, used to call it the nut house. We thought that was cute. All these years later, looking back, I think, how unfair was that to the people confined or treated there, and to all the people that loved those people, but that's what we called it. And often in the summertime, my friend's father would pick his brother up at the nut house and bring him to their house across the street. I was 10 years old. I can still remember that man. I can still see him standing by the side of the garage, looking at the flowers, walking around the yard. He never looked at me, never spoke to me, never gestured to me. But he was pretty scary, I thought. He was, after all, in the nut house. And on those warm Sundays, I never had the courage to cross the street to play with my friend. I just didn't. And when he left my neighborhood late on those Sundays, I felt a sense of relief and safety. They locked people up like that guy to keep the rest of us safe. That's what I thought. And I knew, even as a 10-year-old, that I would never see anyone or know anyone again in my entire lifetime who had a mental health problem. I was wrong about that. It's one of the reasons I've been traveling this state. Some decades after that childhood, in a different state, namely New Hampshire, in a different community than the one I grew up in, namely Manchester, and on a street somewhat different than the one I was raised on, mental illness crossed that road from my childhood and took up residence in my own house. It was unseen, undetected, disguised. My wife and I are baby boomers. We knew nothing about mental illness because no one ever talked about it, no one. But it was there in my house and it was growing. I had two sons, 11 and 13, that took up residence in my 13-year-old son. He didn't know he had a mental health problem. Makes sense when you think about it. How would you know? It's just how you are, how you feel, how you see and respond to other people. He thought it was just him, but it wasn't just him. When he graduated from the 8th grade at St. Joseph's Junior High School, it was a Saturday. He told us he didn't want to go to his graduation. We said, you have to go to your graduation. We thought he didn't want to be bothered. It was a weekend. That wasn't why, but we didn't know that then. My son, my oldest son, was a really good artist, and he spent a lot of time in his room, at his desk with the door closed, drawing. Today, I would describe it as withdrawing, but I was pretty ignorant about mental illness back then. I'm not ignorant now. He started smoking in high school, at Trinity High School. I didn't know that. He kept that pretty well hidden. He had friends at Trinity, but not as many as his younger brother. If you look through the yearbook, the year he graduated, you'll find his picture with all the other graduates. But if you look through the yearbook at all the candid shots, at the football games, at basketball games, the school dances, you won't see his picture there because he wasn't there. He was probably home drawing or withdrawing. I didn't see it then. I see it now. He did okay at Trinity, not great, not as well as he could have, but he was smart and he tested very well, and then he got into a pretty good college in New York, and off he went. I remember those early phone calls from New York. I could detect alcohol in his speech. I didn't know he drank. I don't know when he started, but he was drinking in college. It was alarming, but he would say, Dad, I don't have a drinking problem. And over time, we'd be on the campus, and finally his classmates would seek my wife and I out to express their concern about his drinking. He would say, "Dad, I don't know why they say that. I don't drink more than anybody else." I thought he must have, but I couldn't prove it or disprove it. He looked different to me. He looked more disheveled than I remembered him. But I thought, well, he's in college, he's away from home. They don't dress like me, thank goodness, Governor. So he was a little more casual. But he was different in some ways than his classmates. He graduated from that college. I don't know how he did it. Knowing what I now know, I'm in awe of him. He must have willed himself to that degree. He did okay, but not great, but he tested very well. He got into a pretty good graduate school in Boston, and then he came home to Manchester, lived with my wife and I while he commuted 3 days a week to classes. At that point, he was drinking pretty much every day. He tried to hide it, tried to disguise it, but he really couldn't. He attended classes. I don't know how he did that. And we'd talk to him about his drinking, and he would say, "I don't have a drinking problem. We shouldn't be talking about it all the time." He must have gotten tired of that, so he moved north of Boston for the last 6 months of graduate school. Again, knowing what I now know, how he got his master's degree is almost beyond my comprehension. I admire him for that. And when he graduated, he got a job pretty quickly, which didn't surprise us. He's really smart. He's a talented musician, self-taught. He's a great artist. He's the best-read person I have ever met, then or now. He's funny and good-looking. So it didn't surprise us that he got a job so quickly, but it did surprise us that it only lasted 4 weeks. But it wasn't his fault, he said, that he lost the job. The next job took longer and lasted less time. But it wasn't his fault, he said, that he lost the job. And then he was living with us in Manchester. His life had come to rest, basically. He was drawing, drinking, trying to hide it, and taking graphic design classes where he always excelled. But his life was stationary. And my wife and I were alarmed by it, as you might imagine, so we reached out to the alcohol experts and told them what I've told all of you here tonight. They didn't hesitate. They said, "Your son, Judge, is an alcoholic. That's what's going on." So you and your wife really have two choices. You can put him out, literally out, hope that he hits bottom. I remember hearing that in my childhood. Hope he hits bottom and turns his life around. Or you can leave him in your house and he's going to die drinking here. Not tomorrow or next week or next year, but you can't drink like he's drinking and have a long life. We didn't like those choices. But we joined Al-Anon, families of alcoholics. My son would say to us, "Dad, I am not an alcoholic. If I didn't have these feelings, I wouldn't be drinking." I'd mention that to the alcohol experts, and they would say, "Judge, every alcoholic has a reason they drink. You and your wife better get used to it. He's an alcoholic." And so we had that choice to make. We didn't want to make it. And so we persuaded my son, who said he didn't have a drinking problem, to go to rehab. And then he majored in rehab. New Hampshire, Connecticut, Cape Cod, and Florida. It was like the world tour of rehab. And my wife and I were praying that he would have some insight into his drinking problem in Florida. He was there for several weeks. I picked him up at Logan Airport, and he told me he had been drinking on the plane on the way home. But at least he didn't have a drinking problem, he told me. I was on the Supreme Court at that time, and I would drive from Manchester to Concord back and forth every day. And I would be thinking, we must have failed him somehow. His younger brother had just gotten married, got a master's degree, was moving ahead. My oldest son, smart, handsome, decent, funny, was going backwards at 100 miles an hour, and we couldn't stop it. And he didn't see it. And so finally, my wife and I had to make that decision they told us we had to make. My wife's not here tonight, so I'm not trying to look good in my wife's eyes. Not that I'm opposed to that, but I'm just not doing it right now. But my wife is one of the nicest people you'd ever meet, one of the kindest people. And I tell you that because she was part of the decision tree on our son, and we loved him. And so finally we made the tough love call that I hope no one has to make. And so we put my son out, literally out. He slept in his car, he slept at the shelter in Manchester. He ate at the soup kitchen when he was eating. A couple of times he called us from the street, asked if he could come home. And we said no. We said no. And after 3 weeks of dreading a phone call that no parent wants, we brought him home. We said, well, at least he'll be with us. At least he'll be with us. And when he came home, he was drinking as much as he had been when we put him out. Up to this point, by the way, no one, no doctor, no neighbor, no friend, no one said to us, do you think your son could have a mental health problem? I probably would have been offended, by the way, if you said that. I realized how silly that would have been. I didn't see it. I saw alcohol. My son was traumatized by his time on the street. His underlying mental health problems, I'm sure, exploded by that trauma. He knew his drinking was as bad, and so he knew that he couldn't go back out on the street. He just knew he couldn't do that, and fearful that we might put him out again. And so one night he assaulted me. I went to the ICU at Elliott Hospital. I was there 6 or 8 days. I have no memory of that, but my wife does. I don't know how she survived it. My son was publicly arraigned, issued an orange jumpsuit, and went to the Valley Street Jail in Manchester. You don't want to go there. You really don't want to go there if your father's a judge. I didn't know that then. It was all over the news, my wife told me later, in New Hampshire, in Massachusetts. They wrote about it in the LA Times, the New York Times. 3 of my doctors went on the Today Show while I was in the ICU. I didn't know that then. People magazine reached out to my wife. Can you imagine? She said, I go home every night, there'd be 20 messages on the machine. I'd erase all of them. What would I have told people? What would I have said to them? She visited my son at Valley Street when I was in the ICU. They talked on the phone with plexiglass between them, and she said he was really upset. He said, Mom, is Dad going to be okay? I don't know why I did that to Dad. Just tell me he's going to be okay. I can never forgive myself. In the early days, she didn't know. He said to her, Mom, they won't let visitors here very often, but I can see the cemetery from my cell. And if you went there at 3 o'clock on certain days, I could at least see you. And I would know my family hadn't abandoned me. And so my wife by herself, late March, early April, would drive to that street corner, get out and wave at the jail, give them a thumbs up sign, not knowing what window, what floor, even if he was looking back. Then she said, I'd drive home, I'd cry all the way home. It was very public and profoundly sad, and my wife was bearing the brunt of it. After 6 or 8 days, they wheeled me up to a private room, and I said to the fellow who was pushing me, what am I doing in the hospital? He said, I think you fell. I felt pretty sore for someone who had fallen, but I had no other information. Just a thought, by the way, when you visit people in the hospital, try not to say, I love your room. Okay, just a thought. People would say that to me. Somebody came in one day, and they walked to the window, which looked like a 2-day march from my bed. And they turned around and said, I love the view from your window. Try not to say that. Anyway, after a day and a half, my wife and I were alone in that hospital room. And she told me what had happened as best she knew, and I had not fallen. And she told me where my son was. And the two of us just cried. I've been a judge and a lawyer my whole professional life, so I knew what it meant for him, for us, for his brother. But I didn't understand it. If I had any understanding, it would have been that alcohol, when you abuse it, can take you to bad places. That's what I thought. I don't know what the technical definition of hopelessness is, but I know what it feels like. That's what it feels like. I couldn't even get out of bed for a week. And if I had been able to, I couldn't have done anything anyway. I wasn't allowed to visit my son when I left the hospital. I would have, but they wouldn't allow it. The court wouldn't allow it. My wife would go as many times as she could. She'd come home crying every time. Sometimes friends would go in her place who had known my son since he was little. After 6 months, I took my son from the Valley Street Jail to the Hillsborough County Superior Court in Manchester, where he was sentenced to the state prison. I hope you don't have that day. I would have bet everything I owned that could never be my family, but it was. There was still press covering. It was 6 months later. My wife and I were in the front row of the public section. They brought him in. He looked great. He hadn't had a drink in 6 months. He walked over to me. He was wearing civilian clothing. I wouldn't see that for years. And so I stood up, and he gave me a big hug, and he said, "Dad, I'm so sorry. I don't know why I did that to you. I don't know if you can ever forgive me, Dad. I'll never forgive myself. Just tell me you're going to be okay." And I said, "Well, they tell me I will." I said to him, "We must have gotten into this as a family, and we're going to get out of it as a family." I said, "If you don't quit, your mother and I won't quit." He said, "I won't quit, Dad." And then he was sentenced to 7.5 to 15 years in the state prison. I hope you don't have that day. I don't know how we all didn't pass out. He'd served 6 months, so he had 7 years to go at a minimum. The trial court suspended 4 of the 7. It served those on parole if he was paroled. He was definitely going away for 3 years. And then off he went. It was a long ride home. After 30 days, we were allowed to go visit him. They evaluate the inmates for 30 days. We went up. We had a meeting with the head psychiatrist at the prison in the secure psychiatric unit. I know they do good work there, but it's a sad place. It feels hopeless. It's not, but it feels that way. We met with him and 2 social workers. My son was there. He had to allow it. He started out the meeting by saying, "I've come to know your son over the last 30 days. I really like him. He's smart and funny and talented." I said, "We love our son, Doctor, but we're in the prison today." He said, I know that. Let me tell you what's going on with your son. Your son has really serious depression, anxiety, and panic attacks that are virtually off the charts. If you had his problem," he said, "and you didn't know what it was, and you knew drinking made you feel better for a while, you'd drink too, Judge. He's self-medicating his mental illness. Don't be too judgmental about it. It wasn't a good choice," he said, "but it wasn't illogical. It's the only way he got relief." And when he said that to us in that place, I realized that we had failed him. We were, after all, the parents. I should have known something about mental illness. I didn't. I thought it was hopeless, by the way. It's far from hopeless. I didn't know that then. We'd visit twice a week. Finally, after about 4 months, we went one night, and my son came out and hugged us. He said, "Dad, I feel so different." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "My palms are not sweating all day long. I'm sleeping through the night. My mind is not racing, Dad. I can focus. I'm teaching at the prison." I said, "What are they doing for you here?" He said, "Well, I see a counselor, Dad, and they prescribe medication. I haven't felt like this since I was a small child." And I knew when he told us that we had failed him. My ignorance had not helped him or my family. My son was married at the state prison. Anyone here making wedding plans, I wouldn't go there first. The only advantage is the receptions are pretty inexpensive. Coca-Cola, potato chips. The wedding photographer was an inmate with a Polaroid camera. My son said, "Dad, don't ask him what he's doing here." No one asked at the prison. I said, I wasn't going to ask him, but I'm going to ask him what he charges. So I said to him, "What do you charge for a picture?" He said, $1 a picture, sir. I said, "You are my kind of wedding photographer." I performed the wedding in a conference room off the main visiting room during visiting hours. As weird as it may sound to all of you here tonight, that was the happiest moment in the saddest place. My son's wife got her master's degree with him in Boston. She later won an Emmy for her work on film and film editing in New England. I've held the Emmy statue. It's the real deal. I would keep it, but she won't allow that. They have a 10-year-old daughter, my granddaughter, so I'm her grandfather. I'm totally objective about her. But even if I weren't totally objective, she's just a beautiful child. Every time I hug that little girl, I think you're a miracle. From where we were to where we are. I know what's possible. My son was paroled. I didn't think he would be. I was Chief Justice. I said, you should be, but I'm Chief. They won't do that. Looks like they're favoring the judge's son. He was paroled. They sent a camera up that day from Channel 9. They said, do you have any comments? I said, actually, we do. We're really happy my son's leaving and joining his wife. She was working at Dartmouth College. I said, I want you to know something else, too. My son's not a bad person, he's suddenly a good person. He's always been a good person. He's now well, by the way. They're different things. That first Thanksgiving, we were driving, and he said, Dad, have you always felt like this? I said, what do you mean like this? He said, like I feel, Dad, good, like I feel. And I said, yes. And I knew I failed him. I should have known something. He told me, by the way, on that trip that they gave him an IQ test at the prison. I was curious. I said, how did you do? He said, they told me, Dad, I was 3 points below genius on the IQ test. So I was kidding him. I said, you couldn't be a genius? He said, Dad, they were watching me through a two-way mirror. My ankles were shackled. That must be worth 3 points. So I said, okay, you're a genius. I don't know if he is or not. I know he's a lot smarter than his father, and I love him. If he had said to me, Dad, stop talking about this, I wouldn't be here tonight. Every time I go out to speak, he said, Dad, how'd it go tonight? I'm proud of what you're doing. He's taught me a lot. My wife's the strongest person I know. Kept our family moving west. My son's a close second. So what am I bothering people for tonight? I didn't do anything for a decade, and then one day I got a call from Bill Gunn, who's here tonight. He used to be the head of behavioral health at Concord Hospital. He's a psychologist. He said, John, I have a good friend. Her name is Barbara Van Dalen. She's from Maryland. She wants to start a statewide and actually nationwide campaign on mental health awareness. And she asked me, Bill Gunn, to chair it up here. And I told her I'd help, but I didn't know enough people, but I knew a guy who might know more people. That's why I'm calling you. Would you call her up? To my surprise, I said, sure. But first I Googled her. Oh, come on, you'd do the same thing. And I found out that she had been on Time Magazine's 100 list in 2012. That's kind of the Nelson Mandela list when he was alive. That's an intimidating call to me, so I figured I'd get it out of the way. So I said, Barbara, you're on Time Magazine's 100 list. She was almost embarrassed. She said, well, I was. And I said, Barbara, you and I have more in common than I thought. She said, what do you mean? I said, I'm 101, Barbara, on the 100 list every year. She did what you just did, and I liked her. I said, what are you trying to do? She said, here it is, John. I want to make the 5 most common signs of mental illness as well known and as widely known as the signs of a heart attack or a stroke. I thought that was genius. I still do. She said, I bet you know those. I bet most of you do, too. I said, why don't I know the signs of mental illness, Barbara? She said, it's mental illness, John, that's why. We wall it off, we're ignorant of it, we're afraid of it, we don't learn about it. That would have been me, by the way. So Bill Gunn and Peter Evers, who heads Riverbend, and I were the co-chairs of this effort. We formed a steering committee. Everyone said they'd join it, everyone. Everyone who joined it had a mental health story, sometimes close to home, sometimes not, but everyone had a story. We raised money. We raised $150,000 in no time. I've been dean of the law school at UNH. I know what raising money feels like. This didn't feel like raising money. Dartmouth gave us money. Elliott Hospital gave us money. The New Hampshire Hospital Association gave us $40,000. It was stunning. We launched this campaign, nonpartisan, non-political, on a Monday morning in an empty House chamber, 400 empty theater seats. I said, this is not going to work. Who's going to come to this? An announcement of a mental health awareness campaign? So we did what we could on social media, but it was a work day in May. I said, I'm not feeling good about this. 425 people came. The Catholic bishop, the Episcopal Church, every member of our congressional delegation, our then Governor Maggie Hassan, 3 members of the Supreme Court, educators, mayors, law enforcement, families, the Attorney General. I'd been in a room that impressive. I knew we had touched a nerve. I knew my family hadn't been alone in the valley of mental illness. I just didn't see all these people in the valley. And then Barbara Van Dalen, the genius behind this, asked this question of that room. Does anyone in this chamber this morning, she said, who's been untouched by mental illness? Yourself, your family, your extended family, your friends. If you've been untouched, she said, raise your hand. I didn't know what to expect. Not one hand went up, not one. Meaning every single person had been touched. And then she shared these statistics. Half of all mental illness in the United States arises by age 14, half. My son was 13. 2/3 by age 23. Last year in our country, more people died by suicide, over 45,000, than in every car crash across America, 38,000. Every 90 minutes in our country, every day, every week, every month, some brave American veteran, he or she, takes their own life. We lose 20 veterans a day in America to suicide. We don't talk much about that. It's awkward, so we just don't go there. We need to start talking about it, folks. We need to start dealing with reality. Every physical illness from my childhood to tonight, from the neck down, is treated with empathy, respect, and understanding. Once you get to mental illness, well, if you weren't weak, if you were a better person, oh, snap out of it. Why do we say that? Why do we stigmatize people with a mental health problem? That's on us, by the way. My son says to me, Dad, everyone with a mental health problem has 2 things in common. Number 1, they didn't ask for it. That's true. And number 2, they don't deserve it. But the rest of us make them feel badly about it. It makes no sense to me, and I know it makes no sense to you, so why do we tolerate it? After we launched it, we waited to see if anyone would ask us to speak. In the last 31 months, I've spoken over 335 times. Not about me, it's about this. Most of the people I asked me have never met me. I've been to 125 schools. It has been amazing to me. I'm seeing what I didn't see. I'm learning what I didn't know. We need to change it. One of the first high schools I went was Pembroke Academy. It was in the gym at 9 a.m. Kids were on both sides on the bleachers. Remember the comfortable wooden bleachers from our high school years? Nobody on the floor. I'm under the basketball net on a 6-inch platform with a fixed podium. And I'm looking out at these kids and I'm thinking, they're probably saying, whose grandfather is this guy? What is he doing in my gymnasium? That's what I was thinking. And so I was there then. The ceilings must have been 50 feet high. So I talked for 35 or 40 minutes. I said, they don't care what I'm saying. They can't hear me anyway. But so I finished. It was really awkward. And the principal stepped up on the little platform. Dead silence. Dead silence. For about 3 seconds. I thought, oh my God, this is so embarrassing. And then 840 kids stood up on both sides of that gymnasium and applauded for almost a minute. Principal said, I'm shocked by this. I said, you're shocked. I said, they're not applauding me. They don't know me. They'll never see me. I'll tell you what this generation is telling us. They're tired of it too. There are kids here today who are suffering, or family members who are suffering. They're tired of the shadows and the shame. They're smarter than I was. That's what they're telling us. Some weeks after, I was in a gym in central New Hampshire. Same talk, guy came out of the bleachers. He was tall, looked like a linebacker. He had long hair and a baseball cap on backwards, about 6'3". He got about 2 feet from my face, and I noticed his eyes were wet. He said, can I ask you something? I said, sure, what? He said, can I give you a hug? I said, sure, I'd love a hug. You're 6'3", hug away. He really hugged me, too. And then he told me his story. And I said to myself, oh, my God. I said to him, you may be the toughest guy I'm going to meet in my whole life. Can I return the hug? He said, I'd love that. I've been hugging linebackers in high school gyms. In the last 31 months, including this afternoon at a high school in central New Hampshire, I have hugged hundreds and hundreds of kids with wet eyes, 8th through 12th grade, who sometimes only say, thanks for coming to my school, thanks for talking about it. Sometimes they share their stories with me. In the last month, I've hugged kids who told me they tried to take their own lives in the last year. I didn't see that. I see it now. Kids are suffering. And it's not just children, but that's who I've been talking to and dealing with. We need to change it, and we need to change it now. Let me close with this. When I go around to high schools especially, I say to these kids, you can change the culture if you want. It seems hard, but not if you don't make it hard. I tell them, I said, when I was 12 years old, my dad was a teacher. He must have been paid on Thursday nights, so he felt flush with cash on Thursdays. So my mother, my sister, and my dad and I would go to the same little restaurant in my town. Every table in the restaurant had an ashtray. Some had two. At some point during the night, everyone in the restaurant was smoking. My dad was a science teacher. He was smoking. They loved my mother and father loved my sister and myself as they blew smoke in our face across that table. And then we get in my dad's car, I had an ashtray. Every American car had an ashtray. Then we get back to my house. Every room in my house had an ashtray. The bathrooms in my house had ashtrays. Every coffee table in America had one. Every public school, every public building, every airport, every airplane, every automobile. They were everywhere. I aspired to be a smoker. Have you seen an ashtray recently? What happened to them? Something happened. They're almost gone now. When I was 12 years old, I tell these kids we had a black and white TV in my house. And they look at me like, how old is this guy? And then to get even with them, I say, we had rabbit ears on the TV too. They have no idea what I'm talking about. But I tell them in a serious vein that I, as a kid, sometimes would watch that television at news and I'd see African Americans peacefully marching. I didn't know why, but I do now. Some nights they'd be knocked around like bowling pins or attacked by police dogs or hit with billy clubs. It's pretty alarming to watch that at any age, but at 12 years old, I would say to my mother, where's that happening? She wasn't proud of it. She said, it's happening in our own country. If you would ask me after one of those nightly news broadcasts, John, do you think in your lifetime we will elect somebody with a black face as President of the United States? I would have said, I'll bet you my ashtray we don't do that. Thank you, Barack Obama. I didn't know Senator Obama, I never met him. I was Chief Justice when he was running here. My mother had passed by then, but her voice remained. And the night he was elected, my mother said to me, you better be down there. This is really important. She would have been. So I bought an airline ticket for the swearing-in ceremony. I stood that day on the mall in Washington with 1.3 million of my closest friends. I was so far away from Barack Obama, he looked like he was 2 inches tall. So I watched it mostly on the Jumbotron. He was 15 feet tall on that screen. I was thinking a lot about my mother that day and how proud she would have been of this country. And in less than a minute, after 232 years since we declared our independence from Great Britain, it had been 232 years. In less than a minute, in that distinctive voice, I'd come to recognize Barack Hussein Obama with a funny name and a black face was sworn in as President of the United States and leader of the free world. Something happened. Something changed. Don't tell me we can't change the conversation around mental illness. That's easy by comparison. All you need to do is open your heart and open your mind. If we can eliminate ashtrays from a culture where everyone smoked and where I aspired to be a smoker, if we can elect somebody with a black face to 2 terms in the White House, from the culture I grew up in, where racism was often tolerated and sometimes applauded. If we can do that, we can do this. We can learn the 5 basic signs of mental illness and start a conversation that has not existed in this country since we were formed. Or we can kick the can down the road and lose another generation to shadows and the stigma and the shame. That's not the answer, by the way. Sometimes I feel like I'm on a fool's errand driving around the state. But then I have an experience like I had very recently. I spoke to a middle school, 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. When the kid was leaving the gym, he was an 8th grader, he came over to me, he extended his hand to shake mine, he told me his age and his name. He said, "Thanks for coming to my school today and talking about this." I said, "I'm happy to be here." He said, "They tell me that I'm on the spectrum myself, and your talk today has changed my whole life. Can I hug you?" His eyes were wet, and he hugged me. My eyes were wet. I hadn't changed his life. But in that moment, he knew I would not judge him. I would not shame him. That's the mission. We need to start talking about it. Thanks for listening. I appreciate it very much. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. I just want to introduce the Commissioner of Education in our state. I didn't know the Commissioner until a little over a year ago. He's an unforgettable person, by the way, when you meet him. And he's here with the Deputy Commissioner, Christine Brennan. The Commissioner of Education in our state is a very special person. He loved this campaign, and he wanted to get involved in it, and he wanted to improve it. And so we started the REACT component. How do you react when you find the signs? That was his insistence. He's been with me to 13 or 14 high schools. Governor Sununu came with me to Nashua. Commissioner's been with me 13 or 14 times. I don't know of any other Commissioner of Education in America who's done that. I am really proud to introduce him, our Commissioner of Education, Frank Edelblut.
Thank you. Thank you, Judge Broderick. I sometimes feel like Judge Broderick's sidekick. So we get to go to the high schools and hang out with hundreds, sometimes thousands of high school students. And he tells this compelling story, which is just unbelievable. And I am so grateful to see so many adults in the room, because I think the story is equally as powerful for adults. And this campaign, Know the 5 Signs, is what we are bringing to the students across New Hampshire. 125 schools. We should applaud that. And it is incredible to see him deliver this message to students who put their phones away. And you could hear a pin drop in the auditorium. And at the end, and at the conclusion, really the end of his presentation, I get up and I have the opportunity to share with students these 5 signs. These are really kid-friendly, aren't they? Little smiley faces there. How could you miss with that? And we asked the kids, do they recognize themselves in any of these smiley faces, whether they're not feeling like themselves, or they're feeling agitated, or maybe one of their classmates is feeling agitated, or are they withdrawing, or is one of their classmates withdrawing, or someone in their family? Or are they not caring for themselves? Are they feeling hopeless? And then, as the judge pointed out, when I first saw this, I said, this is brilliant. And then I wanted to just take it a little bit further, so we flipped the card over and we created the REACT campaign. What happens if you see yourself in one of these little faces? And so we equip the kids. We give them tools, including reaching out to their parents and their teachers, coaches, members of the community, if they recognize themselves or one of their friends or someone in their family on this side of the card. And so I am so proud of the work that you are doing. I am proud to be your sidekick in the high school. So thank you so much for that. And thank you all for coming out this evening. Make sure you take this home and talk to your kids about this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Judge Broderick. I'm going to ask, we have some panel guests that are going to join us up on stage, and we can open it up to a few questions and answers. The other thing I'll still remind you is that there's comment cards that you could put questions on there. We have 2 email lists in the back that you can sign up if you'd like to get additional information on what we're talking about this evening. So if the panel, if you can come up to the stage and grab your chairs. Yep, they're up there. Tarek's coming down. And who I am, my name's Candace Porter. I'm the executive director at Connors Klein Foundation, and I've been doing specific suicide prevention work for the past 15 years on a national level, and I started working locally here on a state level with Tara this past September. And similar to the Know the Signs campaign, what we're really working to do is to get an evidence-based suicide prevention curriculum in schools down to the peer level. And one of the key pieces that is included that dovetails on this campaign is learning how to act, acknowledge, care, tell a trusted adult. And as I said earlier, your role here is understanding your role as a trusted adult and also how to equip your loved ones and your children on how to identify that. Because if I'm a young adult and I don't know who that is or who I would talk to, that's someone I'd be worried about. So from the questions and answers, we can open it up. I have Judge Broderick with a microphone ready to go, and you can also field questions to him directly. So before we go, I'm going to ask each panelist to introduce themselves, let you know where they're from and with the work that they're doing. So if you want to go ahead, you can share. We have 2 microphones.
Hi, my name is Jody Labarsky. Thank you so much, everybody who came out this evening for this very important topic. I'm the Child, Adolescent, and Family Services Director at Seacoast Mental Health Center, where I work with our staff to provide programming for youth within our catchment region.
I'm Senator Tom Sherman. I'm a physician here at Exeter Hospital, and I am chair of the Senate Health and Human Services Committee.
I'm Elaine DeMello. I'm representing National Alliance on Mental Illness. That's NAMI, New Hampshire. We've been here in the state for 40 years supporting people who have mental illness and or are affected by mental illness and suicide, and through support groups, through education, advocacy, and the voice of lived experience.
Hi, I'm Lisa Riley. I'm the chair of the New Hampshire chapter of the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. It's great to be with you, and it's great to hear Justice Broderick speak. He is the originator of the real conversation in New Hampshire, and that is something that we really want to be a part of. I guess that's all I have to say right now.
I'm Tara Ball. I'm the founder of Connors Klein Foundation. My 14-year-old son Connor died by suicide in 2011 when he was a freshman at Exeter High School, and I'm here because it's my mission to make sure that every child in every New Hampshire middle school and high school knows the signs and knows what to do if they or one of their friends are struggling, along with all of the adults. So basically everyone in this room, everyone in New Hampshire. Thank you for coming.
Thank you very much. So I'd like to open it up. If you have any questions, just put a hand up and I'll come over with you with a mic, or you can field the question to me. Yep.
Thank you very much. It was a great presentation. Really appreciate it and appreciate the hard work. My son died by suicide about 11 years ago. I wondered if you could react to the challenging problem of mixed reactions to medication, that while medications help a certain percentage of people and that, you know, some percentage have no impact on the medication, other people actually get worse. That was the case with my son. Do you have any reactions to that in terms of having that information out as well, that if someone's on medication, we really need to be watching to see whether the person's actually getting worse from the medication.
I'll let the physician speak too. I'm also a medical provider in New Hampshire. I look at the literature surrounding the use of medication, especially with youth, certainly with concern. But as a medical provider who writes prescriptions, I advise and educate patients about the potential for side effect with everything that I write. In fact, there are some medications that you wouldn't even consider as maybe increasing risk for suicide, that young people have died by suicide during a 6-week course of something for, say, allergy. This is what I tell patients. This may make you feel bad. If it does, I want to know immediately. This is not take this prescription and I'll see you in 6 months, and that's across the board, whether it's a non-steroidal medicine for inflammation or whether it's something more significant like an opioid. That's how I kind of wrap my head around that real time with patients. The literature is plus minus on your concern. Some of those studies and some of the post the autopsies, those kids who died by suicide actually weren't taking their medication. So it's a plus minus. It's a very important issue for sure. I think supporting research that looks into that is a mandate, but across the board in the room, if anybody gives you a prescription for a medication that makes you feel worse, and let's talk about what that means to you individually, you need to stop taking the medicine and call your provider. That's how I would answer that.
I would, as a physician, I would add that I'm not the right kind of physician, but anytime I prescribe, I will go through the side effects and potential benefits and risks and whether or not that actually is going to produce the desired effect. The other part that is most critical for all of you, and I don't remember where the gentleman went who was asking that question, there he is when you are prescribed a medicine, being sure that you fully understand what the expectation is. How should you feel? What are the side effects? So it's some of what Judge Broderick was saying and some of what the governor was saying, and that's that in medicine nowadays we try to make sure our patients are asking us the right questions. And so for all of you here, since there's an audience that's really engaged, ask those questions, especially about medicines that are meant to change how you feel. Ask the questions about, what if I don't feel better? What if I start feeling worse? Do I just keep taking it? What if I'm adding a medicine? And that's where working with a really great pharmacist is very important, because drug interactions are very common. One of the, a lot of people are doing, I believe it's THC oil, you know, the oils that you may be getting over the counter in your latte actually increase what's called the P450 system, which is in your liver, and may actually make medicines that you're on more potent. So be careful, be educated, and watch for side effects that were not anticipated.
Thank you very much. Yeah, go ahead.
The only piece I would add, and I'm not speaking as a physician, I'm speaking as a licensed clinical mental health counselor, is that mental health treatment should be unique to the individual, as in any treatment for any illness. And the recommendation is generally to do a combination of both medication and talk therapy, looking at those evidence-based practices that have the proven research behind them to demonstrate effectiveness with addressing the symptoms. And I know oftentimes when we're working with youth and families or with adults who are seeking treatment, we do try to recommend that combination of treatment that complements both the talk therapy, the medication, and looking at community or home-based supports that can address behavioral needs as well.
Thank you very much. And we have a question up on the balcony, so Sharma's going to go up.
I have one right here.
Yep.
Too.
Okay. Can you? He can project, so then we'll come to the back after.
Okay.
Go ahead. Thank you. Great question. So the question was, how are we correlating the issues of substance abuse and mental illness as combined risk factors as it relates to suicide? Sure. And just make sure you're projecting a little out. It's hard to hear in the back.
Okay.
Yep.
At a state level, and probably should let the governor answer this one, there are several initiatives. The recognition is that these often go in tandem. As Judge Broderick pointed out very clearly, remember, alcoholism is addiction. It's Tim Rourke, who has been involved in this for many years, will tell you that the biggest addiction in the state of New Hampshire is alcoholism. And alcoholism, whether it's alcohol, whether it's crack cocaine, whether it's heroin, often it is used as a treatment for mental illness. They often go together, and to try to address one without being aware of the impact of the other is probably not going to benefit the patient, as Judge Broderick saw in his own son. So the state has taken on several different initiatives. One is the approach to the substance use disorder, and the governor has just rolled out the hub and spoke method, or the hub and spoke system, which really literally just started this month. A second component of this is there's a lot of work being done on mental health. As the governor pointed out, the system was broken and is broken. We have people waiting in our emergency rooms, including our own in Exeter, up to 2 to 3 weeks with minimal treatment for their mental health crisis. And I am introducing a bill on Tuesday. I'd love for all of you to come. In the State House, the bill will fully and comprehensively address ER boarding. This is going to take an entire effort from the community, but to start looking at mental illness in a comprehensive fashion, making sure that when you go to Seacoast Mental Health, you don't have a 3 to 6 week wait to be seen for standard depression evaluation, that they don't have 15 openings for clinical workers, which they currently do, making sure that we have robust system available so that when you walk into the ER with a life-threatening illness of depression, that it's no different from the life-threatening illness of chest pain, and that just like if you come in with chest pain, you're in the cath lab within 30 minutes. When you come into our ER, you should be getting your treatment within 30 minutes if it's a mental health crisis. Right now, it can be up to 3 weeks. These are the programs that are being introduced. The Senate is introducing a comprehensive program to make sure this is available. The second major component on the mental health side is that we have had a 10-year plan in place. It was in place from 2008. It's expired last year, and it was really virtually never implemented. So it's a 10-year plan that never happened. We have a new 10-year plan that is comprehensive. It was put together by experts, and what the 10-year plan is designed to do is to wrap around outpatient, inpatient, and all mental health services and bring them up to the level where we all want, which was what I just described. And I have a bill that will say that we have to have that 10-year plan fully implemented, not in 10 years, but in 2 years. And we can do it. And with the help of all of you, we can get this done. So with the governor's work on the hub and spoke for substance use disorders, and putting that together with the work that's being done on mental health throughout the state, marrying the two by making all of this available in our communities, and that's the approach that we are taking in the Senate and the House, and with the support of the governor, we'll make it a reality.
Thank you very much. So we have a question in the back, but I just want to dovetail on that and say, you being here is you're paying attention now and trying to understand what's being put in place, what are opportunities that can be put in place, and educating yourself. So I think that that's phenomenal. There's a question in the back corner over here.
Thank you. First of all, I wanted to thank Judge Broderick. I've wanted to hear you speak for quite a while, and it was really uplifting, and what you're doing is really encouraging. My name is Sandy Hennequin, and my daughter, Maggie, suffers from depression. Our wake-up call for that was about a year ago when she made an attempt, and we've been seeking treatment, but the one thing that was the trigger for her attempt and has been the thing that has kept her from fully getting to where she needs to be is the issue of bullying, the issue of social media and bullying. And it feels like that should be addressed along with pointing out the 5 signs of mental illness. And I was just curious what's kind of being done on that level to kind of address that, which, at least from my personal experience, is a big part of what really drives a lot of the mental illness crisis and the suicide crisis in children today.
So I really appreciate you bringing up the topic of social media. I think it's one that we're failing to recognize in regards to our youth and the impact it has on their lives. You know, when I was a kid and if somebody picked on me, it stayed in the hallway, I went home and it ended there. Now when a child is bullied or targeted by another youth or a peer, it lasts forever when it's put on social media. And I don't think we always recognize that bullying has now become a 24/7 occurrence for our children. They can't get away from it, they can't leave it, they go onto any social media app and it appears there. We see more and more kids who struggle with social connections and interactions because their idea of connecting with others is through a device, rather than sitting with someone face to face, making eye contact and talking through their problems. The countless number of kids who say, well, I was talking to them, and you have to clarify, were you actually speaking or were you on a device? And you hear mostly 10 times out of 10, they were talking through a device. So I think it's something that we as parents, we as community members, as educators, as physicians and mental health practitioners need to give more attention to the impact and I think the ongoing trauma that many kids experience when they're being targeted on social media by other peers and individuals.
Great. Yeah, I was going to ask. Go ahead.
Thank you. I want to grab this one. This is, the answer is absolutely. So what we've done is 2 or 3-fold. First, we've really tried to put a stakeholder group together. And a stakeholder group that doesn't look anything like this room. We're bringing students in, even as parents. If you think you know what's going on in your kid's classroom, you don't. I don't. I got 2 middle schoolers. I got a 6-year-old. We're really trying to talk to the students and get a better understanding of what's happening in the 4 walls of those classrooms with what's happening in the halls. And when you do that, it's amazing the conversations that come out, right? What the bullying is. We think we know what bullying is, you know. Oh, we were bullied, or we saw bullying when we were kids. It's nothing like we anticipated. And from that, we're letting really students design new ideas. From that, in many ways, the whole idea of bringing the Choose Love and the social emotional learning programs to schools, which was very resisted for quite a long time. But I got to tell you, I've been in rooms where we're talking about bringing SEL to different communities, and there's twice as many people that are in this room in those rooms. People are embracing and they're grabbing onto it. One thing I do want to talk about and take 2 seconds, and I don't want to make a disparaging remark about any individual community or school system, but I got to tell you the biggest thing that fires me up is the number of stories I hear about parents or teachers. Well, we brought it to the superintendent's level, we brought it to the school board level, it kept getting worked up the chain, and there was nothing ultimately done about it. And look, I get it in some ways. When you recognize a problem, you take the responsibility on of having to deal with it. When you recognize as a child in crisis, that you take the responsibility on as a teacher or an administrator of having to be part of that solution. And too often for many years in this state, it was, we'll get them through. It'll be okay. It's not okay. And it's not acceptable. And there are some communities and there's some school systems that embrace it, that dive right in and say, we're going to deal with this thing head on. And I got to tell you, there's a lot that aren't. And so as parents, as teachers, as administrators, we have to be accountable to each other. And again, I can't say enough about what Commissioner Edelblut and Christine Brennan are doing at the Department of Education, holding communities accountable. Right? And you have communities that are really embracing it. Over in Londonderry, you have a young girl that started the I Got Your Back program. I'm from MIT, I don't do letters so well. But it's great, and it's taken off, and it's spreading in communities over there. It's working for them. And teachers are getting involved, right? Teachers are on the front lines of this. They have to be part of that solution. And very often the teachers are there, and they're trying to work with the parents, trying to work with the system, and the system fails them. So in many ways, we believe in local control. We do, right? The state can't just wave a magic wand and force everyone to do something. But we have to take ownership of this in our own communities. And with the stakeholder group that we've put together, it isn't just to meet and talk. We're actually letting students and teachers create these solutions for us because they actually have the answers. So I'm going on a little bit about it because I encourage all of you, get involved. If you have kids, get involved, ask the questions, talk to the teachers, talk to the administrators. What are they doing? Oh, we're on that. We're looking into a program. Not enough. What is the real action that is there, and hold them accountable? And if not, come talk to us, come talk to Frank or Christine or myself. There's a whole host of resources that you have right here. And we almost to a fault, I would love to go into your community and stand with you shoulder to shoulder and demand better action. It's amazing when the governor walks in the room what you get. It is. It's kind of funny, actually. And then you walk out and you hear a different story, and I quickly walk right back in the room. Whatever we can do, because again, this is something that everybody has to really take hold of and demand better accountability from our systems, from our parents, from our communities as a whole. We all have responsibility.
So, my name is Rachel Trebelzi. Thank you. Thank you for saying that, because it's right on the level of the question that I have, because I have a 13-year-old in CMS, and what she's experienced through the beginning of this year has been, to me, as I observe her, who has excellent support with mental health, because I'm a nurse, and I went through many years of being depressed and didn't actually know it until I was about 45 and got with a practitioner who addressed it on a level that I could have that experience like your son, where it's like, have you always felt like this? So my daughter is not supported, and I'm 100% in her life as much as possible. Because at age 13, you know that all changes. So they've experienced at CMS twice having this alarm goes off that says there's a possible shooter in the building. Now, when I met her and, took her away with another child, I witnessed somewhere between 10 and 12 kids bawling their eyes out because they actually had the experience of thinking, I'm never going to see my mom or dad again. And I got that through her texts. So that level of stress is something we've never gone through. And the fact that when I talk to the school about it and call the superintendents, when I talk to the principal, I'm told how great the staff responded. And there, you get the spin about, and I can give you example of how my child was terrified by what happened. So I go to address that, and the spin comes off of our staff did really well, and we've got this absolutely great ALICE training, and then it happens again. The issue is the culture. The culture, one, that it's okay to have those kids terrorized like that. The second thing is exactly what you were talking about, the culture, and talking to the high school students about the ashtrays being gone. Our kids know this stuff isn't right. Like, they know that they shouldn't have to feel, and part of it is we have a New Hampshire law about bullying, that you bully and then you end up, it has to be sent to the state. So you put these kids in these brackets now because the school cannot, deal with it with the students and the parents. And we have all these things in our culture. So the day that they gave information to go to the school after the death, I went to the school and I walked in, and literally, and I'm not saying this to say some people are bad or they're not. I know people deal with grief all different ways. There was not one person from the school there. There was not one teacher, one counselor. What they had is the emergency New Hampshire volunteer social workers, counselors there who, I asked a couple questions up. One is how many parents had come in out of our 2,000 parents at the school. And I was the one person that came in, and I didn't really come in to get something like therapeutic from them. And none of them are from the school, and I said, okay, you've done this before, and you're the people that do this, and they said, yes, we do it when the school's overwhelmed. And I said, well, have you ever had something like this happen, and then be able to have a group of people do something to change the culture, to change the accountability, and they didn't have any examples of that. So here is this tragedy, and the night after, nobody from the school, no plan, no way to make an action. And so my question is, like, how do you, and this is the thing, like, I left, and the one person from around the school was the police officer, and she was like, wow, you really were there a long time. And my question is, like, inside of this culture, because it's about school doing the right thing, medical people doing the right thing, if you say something that's not in tune with, let's do ABC, let's follow this track, people are scared, they're shut down, they don't want to have a conversation about it. And I think that, let's do, acknowledge this. I think it's great, but we all know that doesn't get in with a 13-year-old. What gets in is when they can be authentic, when they can have a conversation that they know no one's going to judge them for. And Judge, you have the example of people coming up to you, that's profound, but we have to make it so that all the kids can have that experience, not that their counselor, the middle school counselor got fired for no reason.
I just want to be mindful of, as far as the question though, I just want to be mindful of who I'm going to direct this to.
Well, the thing is, my question is, how do you address a culture that's just against and scared of being sued and scared of having somebody say something?
Well, I think what we're talking about is that we have to keep doing it. I mean, Judge Broderick talked about, Obama getting elected, and no one thought that would happen. You showing up here and wanting to raise it, that's a key piece, because things need to change and need to continue to improve.
It's so stressful.
Well, from the question standpoint, yes.
Those kids.
Yeah, and I live in Bedford, and we just had the same incident happen a couple weeks ago, and,
A
I know all the
suicide?
moms. No, it was the threat assessment alert and parents having to come get them, and people were very upset. But I'm going to turn over so we can get some questions answered around the issue.
It's like that's real on the ground right now, is how to impact kids,
and
culture.
And I think what Judge Broderick's doing, and that we could talk about from a student level, what we're trying to do is really get in and talk to students and have them be their peer supports and actually learning the message and not just leaving it to the educators getting the training. And that's what the governor also spoke about, that these are children actually coming in and being there saying, what are we going to do? What are we going to listen to? So I'm going to turn the question off. Thank you. I just want to be mindful of time. And anyone else like to add some comments on how we're going to integrate some of these challenges?
I just would want to say really quickly that I think that the research supports this idea of peer-to-peer support, the idea of where the students have some level of investment in how they each do together. There's a number of programs. The Yellow Ribbon Program for Suicide Prevention comes to mind. Sources of Strength, which is a Peter Wyman program out of Rochester, New York. The idea is that the students are invested in each other, and the idea of kind of mixing students. So the geeks, the nerds, the athletes, they're kind of intermingled, and the investment is in each other, keeping each other safe. I can't speak directly to your concern about how to, lighten up the load in terms of this kind of post-traumatic stress related to a lockdown. I do believe an authentic discussion, real conversation about some of this stuff. We have to be language appropriate, of course, but tonight is really about that. What's the next step? So let's all take a training. Let's all get comfortable with the language, and how do you talk to your kid about some of these things? And that's, I think, what tonight is about.
And, we're not representing the school and what their policy is and what they went into place. We're wanting to hear from you what you would like to see moving forward, what would be helpful for you to learn about, and we can also continue to educate you beyond tonight's meeting on programs and practices that are in place, both here in New Hampshire but on a national level, so that you feel like you continue to be informed and that you could be doing your role with reaching out both on the legislation side, all the way down to the school side, but most importantly to your youth, your kids, your neighbors' kids, your family, okay? So with that, I want to be mindful of time and make sure everyone has time to fill out that comment card. There's a couple baskets in the back. There's resources on all your chairs. Want to make sure to point out the Suicide Prevention Lifeline number is on a number of the resources. That's a 24-hour access line that you can call if you're worried about yourself or a loved one and get information. Go ahead, Chairman.
Do we have time for one more, or?
What? Sorry,
Do we have time for one more question?
I think,
or no?
do you want, oh, we have one more. Yep, so while you're doing your comment cards, we're going to take the last question.
All right, thank you, Governor Sununu, Commissioner Edelblut, the panel for coming down. I really appreciate it. Just wanted to quickly ask a question to the audience, but first, my name is Sam Warak. I had a brother who died from a prescription drug interaction when I was 12. I grew up in New Hampshire. This was obviously very tough. He was a freshman at UNH. I went to UNH. But right now, I run a company called Next Step Health Tech. Ironically, you say it's time for the next step. Completely agree. But we have an app coming out, which should be very helpful for a lot of people in the audience. We have a map-based resource finder for different mental health facilities, substance use disorder facilities, as well as in-app education and peer support portal. So I actually just wanted to ask a question to everybody and say if you have any ideas or how we might better serve this population, please go to our website. It's nextstep.world. Send us a note. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you, and we'll make sure to get your information when we send out the follow-up to anyone that puts their email down. So again, oh, sorry. This was a conversation starter, and we appreciate you taking the time. There are going to be future activities in the local committee, a local community and statewide, so we will make sure to keep you informed and understand what resources are available and what you could do. Thank you, Governor. Thank you, everybody that put this together. I truly appreciate it. Thank you, John.